So, Day, Esther, and Mary, they go up into the stadium and they find all of their other friends. In particular, John and his two buddies, and Raven with Riley Grace, and of course the three Gothic girls that were Day's original friends from childhood. Let's see, what was that? Chris, Eve, and Helen. So at any rate, they all say hi to each other and they give each other a hug and a kiss on the cheek, and they're excited that the wrestling match will be starting pretty soon. Esther mentioned to John, who was sitting behind her, she says, appears that you've got my back again. And John made a comment that nobody will get to you, Esther, as long as I'm behind you. And Esther smiled, went about visiting the other girls. It was loud and exciting in the Colosseum. And eventually, the lights dimmed a little. Spotlights went flying all around. And the stage was emptied. Before the lights went out, they noticed the twins were up on the stage along with probably 20 other people. Didn't know who they all were. Satan's manager, Dr. Mann, was up there. So everybody left the wrestling ring, and it was Michael Wade, the MC that had been there from the beginning. He had his golden microphone, and he announced that this was going to be the first match of the evening. Rhino versus Booker Black. And Booker Black was a challenger from the western part of the United States. Rhino was a really good wrestler from Australia and had gained quite a bit of following. And so it was Michael Wade introduced the referee, and then he stepped out of the ring and nodded for it to begin. A bell was rung, and the two wrestlers ran to each other and they started doing forearm slams on each other. And they moved about and they tossed each other around in typical professional wrestling movements. At one point, Rhino climbed the corner pole, jumped down on Booker Black, slamming him to the floor, and for some reason that hurt him quite a bit. from that point on, Booker Black wasn't at his best. And within a couple more minutes, Rhino had defeated Booker Black. And it took a total of about 12 minutes. 12, I'd say, yeah, 12 minutes. And so Booker Black had to be removed and carried off in a stretcher. Nobody seemed too concerned about him, unfortunately. And so the Rhino took the microphone and he bragged and he said, he's looking to create a dominance in the WOW. The WOW is the World Organization of Wrestlers, and he wanted to be on top. So he bragged and he spoke and then finally relinquished the microphone to Micah Wade and left the ring. So at that point, they were getting ready to have their second match, and one of the security people came up to Esther and gave her a note. It was from the twins, and they wanted her to come down into the lower level. And so Esther said to Day and Mary, would you come with me? I need to go downstairs. And Day absolutely was interested. Mary had seen Esther in action before, and she didn't want to miss anything, just in case. So even though she loved the wrestling, she was more than curious on what Esther was going to do. And then Esther also invited Raven and Riley Grace. So they all went with the security guard over to an entrance, and they went downstairs. It was just one level down, and waiting for Esther was Danielle, Elizabeth, and Tracy Ann. And they said to Esther, well, we have a problem. Their champion, their wrestler, Bo Jackson, he had locked himself into the dressing room and wouldn't come out. So Esther said, lead us to his room. And it was only a couple doors down. And then Esther asked Riley Grace to unlock the door. So she pulled a pin out of her hair, amazingly. And within a matter of 15 seconds, she said the door is unlocked. So Esther was very proud of Riley Grace. She knew she could do this. And so Esther then turned to the twins and said, you go in first and tell Bo Jackson that you have some friends here to help. And they did. And then the girls followed the twins, but they kept at a distance. So Danielle went closer to Bo Jackson and said, we have our friend Esther here. She's from China and she's very special, and we'd like you to listen to her. And so at that point, Esther walked up closer to Bo Jackson and asked him to stand up. So he had been slumped into a recliner. He had lost quite a bit of confidence. He stood up and Esther looked up at him. He was 6'4", and she said, "You're a mountain of a man. You are 340 pounds of muscle." And then Esther told him, "I only require about 3 hours sleep a night. So I spend a lot of my time doing research on all types of subjects." She said, "And I discovered that you are a very good wrestler. Unlike all the other wrestlers at WOW, you were a national champion in wrestling and an Olympic hopeful." She said, "That is something no other wrestler has here." She said, "You're right. Satan is strong, and he should be feared. But you are a very good wrestler, and you know how to defeat a stronger opponent because you have the moves and the technique to control them." And at that point, Satan appeared at the entrance of his room, and in a muffled, raspy voice, Satan said, "I smell fear in here." He says, "I am going to dominate Bo Jackson tonight." Well, Satan, nobody knew who he was. He was wearing his skin-tight red outfit with a silk mask over his face. And he approached closer and said, "I'm going to leave an impression on you tonight." Esther stepped towards Satan and said, "You should leave here. You're not welcomed." Satan said, "Get out of my way. I am going to deal with Bo Jackson." And Satan moved his arm to push Esther away. She brushed his arm aside, hit Satan in the sternum, sending him flying back into the hallway, where he hit the wall and fell down to his knees. He was shocked. He quickly glanced back into the room and said, "Who are you?" And then he ran down and disappeared down the hallway. This impressed Bo Jackson, because he knew if this young woman could push Satan so far, he was only a man. And so then Esther again turned to Bo Jackson and said, "Yes, he's only a man, a very strong man. But as I said, you are a very talented wrestler, and you can use this to your advantage." So Bo Jackson said, "I had been foolish to be concerned." He said, "I am ready to go." He said, "Thank you for coming and speaking with me." The twins both hugged Esther. All the girls were somewhat amazed that Esther had pushed Satan out of the room so easily, all of them except for Day. She knew Esther had that ability. So Mary, or Esther, said, "Oh, let's return to the upstairs and watch the rest of the matches." Mary Kate made a comment. That might all be anticlimactic compared to what I've just seen. And Esther just grinned at her, grabbed her arm, pulled her to the side, and grabbed Day on the other side and said, "Let's go upstairs and watch the rest." And so Day said to Mary, "I'm glad that if I'm not here, that I know you'll be here covering Esther's back." And Esther looked at Day and said, "Day, he'll always be here." And she smiled and said, "I know these things." And she looked at Mary and said, "And Mary will always be here too." And she grinned. "Let's go upstairs." So all the girls went back upstairs and waited for the remainder of the matches to start. And the twins, they stayed with Bo Jackson until they would be called up.